Hi, this is Joe Osmick with Coachella Valley Water District. And for the next couple of minutes, we're going to be doing site-specific chemical training. This is a requirement through Riverside County Department of Environmental Health. And all departments that do field work need to go through this training. It is something that inspectors ask to see that you all have participated and completed this training when they come out and do annual site visits. And with that, I wanted to let you know that at the end of this, there will be a brief quiz. You'll all get through it. It'll be fine. When you complete that quiz, please give it to your supervisor, who then will pass it on to me, and I'll keep it on file. There will also be a roster. Make sure that you sign that roster with your employee ID number, and make sure that gets turned in to your supervisor as well. Again, my name is Joe Osmick. I'm Environmental Safety Specialist at Coachella Valley Water District. My contact information is there in the lower left-hand corner, along with my extension. I'm here as a resource to you and here to help you. So if you have any questions after you take the training, please feel free to reach out to me, either email me or give me a call, or route your questions through your supervisor. I'll be glad to help you however I can. So our agenda, what have we been talking about? These 5 points, we're going to talk about safety data sheets, and this is really geared as a refresher for you. I'm assuming that you've all looked at SDSs at some point. We're going to focus on specific points in the SDS, because to go through each one individually and all the sections in those SDSs would take quite a bit of time. We'll be focusing on the chemicals that you could potentially come in contact with at sites. We're covering all the chemicals. Some of the sites you go to may not have some of them, but I want to make sure that we touch upon all the chemicals that you use or work with at any site you might go to. We're also going to touch upon empty containers, and I'll give you more information on that when we come upon that slide. NFPA, the NFPA placards, National Fire Protection Association placards. These are the multicolored signs that you see out at sites. We'll talk about those and give you a little briefing and refresher on that. And then how to access SDSs. So if you want to look up information, you have the right to review that, pull that information up and review it as an employee of the district. So let's get started. So on safety data sheets, there are 16 sections. We're going to focus on 3 of the 16, item 2, 4, and 5. Hazard identification, first aid measures, and firefighting measures. So the chemicals on site that we're going to talk about will include diesel, ferric chloride, sulfuric acid, the polymer, resin polymer that's at several sites, sodium hydroxide, calcium hypochlorite, and arsenic sludge. We do generate hazardous waste and arsenic sludge at a couple of the well sites. So this is the format that we're going to go through. It is pretty laborious to go through these points. You're going to see a lot of repetition, but just something that we have to get through as a refresher and give you this information. So we're going to talk about hazards, exposure, and firefighting measures. And a lot of this is repetitive, so just bear with me as we go through this, okay? So the hazards with diesel fuel, as you know, I'm sure, it is a flammable liquid, and vapors will generate a flash point at 125 degrees Fahrenheit. Long-term exposure can cause damage to your internal organs, can cause fatality if it's swallowed, and long-term chronic exposure. This would be something that you're in this material continually, which obviously you're not. It can cause cancer. And this is information that I pulled off the SDSs to review with you. As far as firefighting measures, if you do come across a fire, first thing is remove yourself from the situation if the fire cannot be controlled, and call 911. We're not expecting you to be firefighters here. This is just precautionary information. As you know, there are dry chemical fire extinguishers at the facilities that you go to. And in this case, if there was a fire involving diesel fuel, you would use the dry chemical fire extinguisher. You want to make sure that you're wearing your proper PPE if you're putting out a relatively small fire that's controllable. Safety gloves, steel-toe boots, safety glasses, just, a reminder to wear your proper PPE. As far as exposure, if it gets in your eyes, and this is pretty repetitive, you're going to see this throughout the SDSs that we're going to walk through. You want to flush your eyes with large amounts of water for at least 15 minutes. Skin, if it gets on your skin, you want to remove any of the contaminated clothing that's connected to your skin. And if it's on your shoes, you want to make sure you remove it from your shoes as well. Wash the exposed area thoroughly with soap and water. I know I'm stating the obvious, but again, this is just a reminder. Inhalation, if you're overcome with diesel vapors, you want to move to fresh air and seek medical attention. The next chemical is ferric chloride. Realize not all sites carry some of these materials. Again, we're reviewing it. If you do go to sites where there is ferric chloride, we have 3 well sites where we have this material. You'll recognize the hazards, firefighting measures, and exposure. Hazards involved, again, wearing proper PPE so the material doesn't get into your eyes, because if it does, it can cause irreversible eye damage. Closed containers that are exposed to extreme heat, temperatures at 120, 30, 40, 50 degrees can cause rupture. So I want to be cautious about that. The material is incompatible with metals, aluminum, and oxidizers. If it does come in contact with those materials, it can generate chlorine from the ferric chloride. Decomposition, when heated, it will emit a chlorine vapor, so something to be aware of. And obviously, you don't want to ingest this material. It can cause burns to your mouth, nose, and throat. Firefighting measures, in this case, water spray is best suited for extinguishing any fires involving ferric chloride. The material is inflammable, it's not combustible, but if it's involved with fire, you want to use a water spray. And again, emphasizing from a safety standpoint, you want to remove yourself from a situation if the fire cannot be controlled. Again, we're not expecting you to be firefighters here. We're just giving you an outline of precautionary measures. Exposure items, in this case, if it does get in your eyes, you want to increase the time involved in flushing your eyes from 15 to 30 minutes. Generally speaking, when material gets into your eyes or on your skin, you want to flush it with water for 15 minutes. In this case, because it is a very hazardous material, you want to account for 30 minutes to provide adequate flushing of your eyes. Skin, flush with water for 15 minutes. Remove contaminated clothing, obviously. Inhalation, if you succumb with the vapors, you want to move to fresh air and seek medical attention. Ingestion, if you look at the SDS, you don't want to induce vomiting if you should ingest any of these materials, because it can cause more damage than anything. In this case, what you would want to do, though, is drink if the person's conscious and able. You want to drink a half a glass to a glass of water to dilute that acid that you've ingested. Again, the SDS outlines a lot of this information. Moving on to sulfuric acid, it's understood that at some of the facilities where you do have a sulfuric acid, there's 3 well sites, it's a 75 to 99% concentrated sulfuric acid, pretty concentrated material. It is non-flammable, obviously. Sulfuric acid attacks the respiratory system, eyes, skin, teeth, and lungs. So you want to make sure that you're wearing face shields, safety glasses when you're working with this. At this concentration can be very dangerous, especially if it is ingested. Fire measures, again, this will react violently with water. In this case, you don't want to apply water. You want to use a dry chemical fire extinguishers. Again, emphasizing remove yourself from the situation if the fire can't be controlled. Exposures, if it gets in your eyes, again, because of the corrosive nature of this material, you want to flush your eyes for at least 30 minutes with fresh water. Skin, you want to make sure that you remove the clothing and shoes as well if it gets on that material, and wash the exposed area thoroughly for 15 minutes with soap and water. Inhalation, again, move to fresh air and seek medical attention. As far as dealing with any ingestion, the last bullet item there under exposure, try to drink or provide the person who's ingested the material at least a half a glass of water to dilute the acid, and seek medical attention immediately. Some of the sites do carry a polymer, a Drew-Flock polymer 274. I've got a photograph of it in their lower left-hand corner. You may have seen this material. It comes in super sacks. May form combustible dust concentrations in air. There's a lot of surface area on the granular polymer. That's the reason that it can cause combustion when it's moved if the material containers are not kept closed. It can combust with oxygen fairly easily. So be cautious and judicious when you're working with this material. As far as firefighting measures, the SDS outlines that water spray or dry chemical can be used on this material, but again, emphasizing, and I know this is repetitive, remove yourself from the situation if you can't control the fire, and call 911. Exposure, if the material should get in your eyes, hopefully it doesn't happen if you're wearing your PPE, again, safety glasses, face shields, gloves. You want to flush your eyes with water for 15 minutes. Skin, remove the contaminated clothing and shoes and wash the exposed area thoroughly with soap and water. Inhalation, ingestion are similar to what we've already talked about. Signs of exposure, stomach or intestinal upset, cough, headache, dizziness, or shortness of breath for long-term acute exposure. This is all outlined again in the SDSs. Sodium hydroxide or caustic material, the hazards, very high pH. It is corrosive. Repeated inhalation of dust vapors can lead to permanent lung damage. So when you're working with this material, I suggest wearing dust masks. Prolonged or repeated skin contact can cause dermatitis, a skin condition that's irritable. And you just definitely want to wear your PPE and safety gloves, a face shield, respiratory protections, safety glasses at a minimum. Firefighting measures, again, use dry chemical fire extinguisher. That's what's outlined in the SDS. Proper PPE, safety glasses, face shield, as I mentioned, dust mask, neoprene or nitrile gloves are best suited when handling this material. Again, the material isn't combustible itself, but if it is involved with fire, and you can't control it, please just remove yourself from the situation. Again, dial 911. Exposure pretty much follows along the lines of what we've already talked about in terms of your eyes and your skin and inhalation. Again, do not induce vomiting and seek medical attention as soon as possible. Calcium hypochlorite, similar to chlorine, just less corrosive. This is at some of the sites, not all. Again, just reviewing the firefighting measures. It's not combustible under normal storage conditions, but is a strong oxidizer. So when someone explains to you or says to you it's an oxidizer, what does that mean? That means that this chemical, in reaction with other materials, especially things that are not compatible, will generate oxygen. Oxygen just enhances a chemical reaction, enhances the ability for fire. So you want to handle this carefully. It's not compatible with acids, flammable or combustible materials, and nitrogen-containing compounds. So be aware of that. Use water spray to extinguish the fire. It is a strong oxidizer. Wear proper PPE to avoid skin contact. SDS outlines what you should be wearing. Safety glasses, face shield, nitrile or some sort of latex gloves to protect your hands. If you can handle this directly. Material itself is not flammable, obviously. But if it is involved with the fire, you just want to account for what you should be using for firefighting measures. Again, remove yourself from the situation if the fire can't be controlled and call 911. I've outlined the hazards there. Recommend not storing where daily temperatures exceed 95 degrees. Direct sunlight outside is the main concern there. It is corrosive to tissues and upon inhalation can cause irritation of the respiratory tract. Dry material causes moderate skin irritation, can cause skin burns and damage to the eyes. pH solutions, typically when this material is mixed, will be at 10.8. still on the caustic side, high pH, so something to be aware of, even though it might be in water, still have a high pH, still have to exercise caution. And of course, it's harmful if swallowed. It'll burn your digestive tract. Again, similar exposure considerations, flush your eyes with water for at least 15 minutes. And I know this sounds very repetitive. It is, but again, it's a reminder to protect you, protect yourselves when you go out. Be aware of the hazards, exposure, and the fire measures. Arsenic sludge. 3 of our sites do generate sludge from the water treatment operations. It's a dry filter cake sludge that contains arsenic. It's a naturally occurring element in the water and soils in the Western United States. So be aware of. I've indicated what those symptoms of arsenic poisoning would be. Acute would be something short-term, very high concentrations. If you're wearing your PPE, proper PPE, as we've talked about before, you shouldn't have to be concerned so much with this poisoning because you're protecting yourselves. But I did want to outline what the acute and chronic considerations are, and they're listed there in the lower left-hand corner. Can cause skin irritation, harmful if absorbed through the skin, can cause eye and respiratory tract irritation. Firefighting measures, the material itself isn't flammable. If it is involved with the fire, though, you just want to make sure that you use dry chemical fire extinguishers, which are located at all the sites. Again, emphasizing to wear your proper PPE, and again, remove yourself from the situation if the fire cannot be controlled. Exposure items, I think we've pretty much covered this repeatedly over the past several slides for eye, skin, inhalation, and ingestion. Something that I've seen at sites are the use or reuse of empty containers. It is a good idea, if you have these containers and you like to use them, that's fine. But what you need to be aware of is that there are regulations as far as what is an empty container. So when a material is removed from a plastic container, be it a 5-gallon bucket or perhaps a 55-gallon metal drum, you want to make sure that all the material has been removed that is physically possible. All right, you want to remove all the material, should have less than 1 inch of material in the container. Don't want any residual materials left in those. Those are considered waste. And you need to make sure that all labeling has been reviewed. I have gone out to sites and I've seen this where containers are repurposed, which is fine, and the material is removed, but there's still labels on them. So, if there was an emergency, or if a regulator comes out and does an inspection, that regulator is going to assume that these containers are still holding the material, oxidizers, in this case, the chlorine tablets, okay? And it's not the case. So I'm just asking you to make sure that we follow these 3 points that I've listed here. We don't have situations where we're stacking up containers like this with different types of parts or equipment, and they're still labeled as containing hazardous material. Or you're leaving containers outside with over 1 inch of material like I've seen in the lower right-hand corner, okay? It's just not a good practice from an environmental standpoint. Materials can get airborne. People get exposed to this, can tip over, go onto the ground, leach into the soil, get into the groundwater. It just creates an unnecessary environmental and safety hazard. So just be aware of this. I know you've all seen these placards. NFPA basically put these together years ago. NFPA is National Fire Protection Association. It's a nonprofit organization that provides support, guidance, testing, and standardization to developing SDSs to different private and public entities. They came up with the design of this some time ago, and I know this is a refresher for you, so we're just going to walk through this briefly. The blue section in this placard references the health hazard, 0 being normal material, 4 being extremely deadly. Fire hazards outlined in red. So something that will not burn, like water, would be given a ranking of 0. Something with a very high flash point, say gasoline that has a flash point of minus 50 degrees Fahrenheit, which it does, would basically be ranked a 4. Something that's unstable, like say acetylene, that could detonate would have a rating in the yellow box of a 3 or 4, and any specific qualifiers to identify the material as an oxidizer or where not to use water or an asphyxiant would be listed or labeled in the white section. What I've done for you in the upper right-hand corner here is list the chemicals, the hazardous materials that we've gone through to give you an idea what the NFPAs are. So if you look at ferric chloride, the health hazard would be a 2, fire hazard would be a 0, and the instability would be a 1. And so far and so forth in looking at the other materials there. Some important information to be aware of in accessing SDSs. You can access those by going to your program library. You open that up on your desktop, you go to MSDS Right to Know, and you'll see an icon there. Click on the icon and we'll have all the SDSs listed that we just talked about, as well as others. Another thing I've used in the past, it's called Cameo. You can go to your app store and download Cameo. I've given you the address there. It's a government app, doesn't cost you anything, and you can identify different types of hazardous materials. And the nice thing about this is that you can build your library at the base there. If you look at search, you can do a search on any chemical. You can build a library of your chemicals by saving those to that app. And it'll give you real clear-cut information on chemical identifiers, hazards, response recommendation, physical properties, safety information. It's really a condensed version of the SDS. I like working with it. I use it both at work and at home. It's nice information to have at your fingertips to keep yourself safe at home and on the job. The easiest way to access SDS is by going to the Coachella Valley Water District internet site. And when you go to that site, if you click on safety, it'll take you to the link where SDSs are located, and that's shown in the upper right-hand corner. Once you open that up, you'll see a screen similar to what's located in the lower right-hand corner with the listing of all our hazardous chemicals throughout our organization. And you can type in which category you want to look up, if it's flammable, corrosive, combustible, or you can reference according to the hazardous material. Just type in what the hazardous material is. It'll pull up the SDS. You can download it. You can print it out. The information's at your fingertips. So that concludes the training. You're good for another year. As I mentioned, you're going to be given a quiz. If you paid attention through these slides, you shouldn't have any problem. There are 5 questions, very straightforward. If you need any help, feel free to email me or call me at my extension. I'm here as a resource to you. Okay, that's all I have. Thanks for your patience and sitting through this. I know it was pretty long, and hopefully you gained some insight into some of the hazardous materials and chemicals that are stored on our sites and that you work with. Thank you.